101 guns from the 101 Ranch, Miller Ranch, out of Colonel Jim Eskew was the one that gave Dad these guns. And why, I don't know. I think it was, Dad used to do a lot of rodeo years ago. Madison Square Garden, Boston Gardens, Chicago, Soldier Field, Houston, Dallas, all over doing it. Oklahoma, which is where the 101 Ranch was from. And Colonel Jim Eskew, I think, if I remember right, was the stock contractor for a lot of those rodeos. He would bring in stock for the rodeo. And he and Jim Eskew, Dad and Jim, Colonel Jim, were really good friends. I mean, they saw each other at all the rodeo circles and everything that took place cowboy. Both of them were there. And they struck up a really good friendship. And these two guns were a shipment of 12 that came to the Miller Ranch. Both of them have Colt letters stating they were from the Miller Ranch, and they were two of 12 guns that came in. And of course, the 101 Ranch had a huge Wild West show. I mean, it was huge. I mean, they had, I don't know how, casts of hundreds. I mean, Indians and cowboys, and very similar to Buffalo Bill Cody. So a lot of these guns came in for their shows. I mean, the cowboys needed guns to shoot, the blanks and stuff. So I'm sure that they were, but I think Colonel Jim had them gold plated. And of course, when they bring them in, they hit them with a stamp, 101, right off the bat. And he presented it to my dad. Well, they became my dad's favorite guns, especially because at that time, color. In her dad's early career, there wasn't any color film at all. In fact, his first movies, there wasn't up until probably the early 40s, there was no color film until it came up with true color, but there really wasn't that good a color either. So, but they would shoot, when his comic books started coming out, especially in the 50s, early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, these guns really stood out color-wise because most of his comic books were done, instead of being hand-colored earlier, they were shot in actual film color. And so these guns really popped. I mean, there was a lot of guns, different ones that he used. But these, Dad had a program in 1949 called Gold Mine for 49, and basically it had to do with merchandising. That if you tied in with Roy and his merchandising, you'd have a gold mine, basically. And so Nudie made him a very special, his rodeo tailor made him a very special rig. And the rig was open bottom, so that the guns could stick through. And I said to Dad, why didn't he make them longer? Because if you look at a lot of the pictures, these guns are in Dad's holsters, the barrels stick down below the bottom of an inch and a half or sometimes. And he said, what difference does that make? I said, I don't know, it just looks funny. He says, to you it looks funny, to kids it don't matter. So I said, okay, I know where we're coming from. But he loved the guns, and he used them he changed the grips a few times because he dropped them like anybody else. He would spin them all the time. Well, spinning 7.5-inch barrels compared to 5.5-inch barrels is a lot different. And I remember him sitting out on the driveway. He had in the car. I'm going to turn it off. I'm sorry.
No, I know you need to take these calls. It's fine, Dusty.
I'm just thinking you spin something longer than you used to
Hello?
get hit in the face.
Okay.
I just
Okay. I don't know why it keeps coming, but I'm doing interviews right now in front of a camera. So okay. All right. I'll shut her down. Thanks.
That's a good idea.
All right. I know how to fix this problem.
I know, I'm going to do mine too while you're doing that, because we've gotten very lucky that mine hasn't run.
Yeah.
So he had this special rig made, and they used it on from his comic on just about every comic book cover from, I want to say 49 to 50 up through 60s or up in the middle 60s. These guns were the ones that he wore, and because they photographed so well, and he flat wore the gold off of them. I mean, if you look at them, there's a lot of wear on them. There's barrel wear, there's cylinder wear from going in and out of his holsters. But later in life, I told him, I said, Dad, why don't we have them replated? They look great. He says, why? And I said, well, you know, bring the gold back. He says, they're fine. That's the way I took them out of my holster. I laid them down. They're fine. So Dad was always, never one to really, you know, it's like, you know, why didn't you repaint your car if you wanted a paint? Doesn't matter. You know, it was no big deal. So, but historically, you know, the 101 Ranch just really adds not only the provenance behind Dad owning them and shooting them so many times, and you know, so many blanks going through them, but also being 101. I mean, you know, you can't get a better set of guns than those two right there.
Wildcat Kelly, looking mighty pale, was standing by the sheriff's side. And when that sheriff said, I'm taking you to jail, Wildcat raised his head and